The morning of December 13, 1943 dawned as a day of diamonds for Captain William Jekyll, as he was on a mission to assist ground troops on the attack. But the minute he got into the area, his day soon turned to stone.
That day we were going to take off happily and fly over to Arroway, New Britain, and cover the troops over there that had landed about 3 or 4 days before, the infantry that had landed at Arroway, New Britain. And so that morning off, it was dark. We'd been bombed the night before by the Japanese, not anything vicious, but bombing, and put craters in the areaway, in the revetment area. So that morning in taxiing out, being led out, I was led out in the nose wheel of the 38 that I was taxiing out in my own plane, went into a soft area that had just been covered over, a bomb crater, so it covered over with dirt. And the nose wheel went into it, and bingo, down I went. Broke the nose wheel off. That was the end of that airplane. And my crew chief, the gang ran over to me and wanted to know if I'd like to have another airplane. Sure, so they took all the stuff out, and rushed over into the Jeeps and stuff, and over we go with this other airplane. So anyway, by the time I got in that plane, strapped in and taxied back out to the airstrip, everyone was gone. They all took off. This is a Dobadura. And I sat there and thought, wait a minute, what am I going to do now? It's about an hour and a half, hour and 45-minute flight across the sea to get over there to Arroway. And am I going to do it myself? What if I run into Japanese planes on the way over? I'm a goner. So I thought, we'll do it. So off I went. And I flew across there by myself, all the way over to Arroway. And as I approached Arroway, I called our squadron commander, Warren Lewis, and said, Louis, this is Jekyll coming in. And he says, take the last flight, lead the last flight. And I noticed her pull into position and all, then in came a whole slug of Zeros and stuff to go after these guys on the beach. With that, Louis says, let's get them, drop the tanks. So down he went, the next flight, the next flight. By the time we dropped down and dove into them, we were going so damn fast, going through that back. I never got a shot off. None of us got a shot off of that flight. We went chop, right on through. We scattered them all over the sky, though, in the act of doing this. No sooner got back into the fight, and I thought, this is great. About this time, I'm peeling right off, and I'll peel right in behind a Zero. Got him, he's going to be deader than hell. I looked back to see if my guys were with me. Yeah, Pete's back there, the boys are still there. I looked over on this side, and oh my God. There's a P-38 staring me right in the face. Right there it is. And I've shoved everything forward. I just dumped everything. And I was hit. And it felt like getting hit by a Mack truck. And as soon as I was hit, I lost all control. It broke. What he did, the wing of his plane cut right through the right boom and cut everything off, all my controls. So I had no pedals, nothing at all. I was a goner. So the next thing is to get out of that thing. I pulled the canopy, tripped the canopy, which pulls the pins back here to release the canopy, and it went back all right. But this airplane hadn't been used very often or recently. Somebody had put a copper wire from the top of the canopy here, cockpit here back, to hold the canopy from falling all the way back. But when I pulled the pins, I released the canopy all right, but now it's flailing back and forth because it's still hooked onto the front, flailing back and forth across the top of the cockpit for me to get out of it. So I had to unstrap the seatbelt and work trying to break that copper wire so I get the canopy out of the way, which I did, before I could get out of the plane. In the meantime, the plane is all over the sky. There's no control to it at all. And I try to get out next, and the oxygen mask is still hooked up to me. I got to get that off of me. Then I go to get out, and I realize the ear gadgetries are still hooked up to me. So, and the law was always, if you get out of the thing, don't just straight bail out, because if you do, that boom is going to get you and break your back. You know what I'm talking about? So I got out and scooched down the side of the plane, down the side of the canopy, down onto the wing, as best I could. And I looked back, and the whole thing's gone. The the other part had broken right off too. So all I was looking at is two stacks sticking back there. Didn't really worry about the boom at all. So I let go. And to this day, I don't know whether I let go. I remember looking at the cockpit. I don't remember whether it was reading 9,000 or 19,000. I don't know which it was. But out I went. And after I got out there, pulled the drip cord, and here's the parachute I thought I had brought with me all the way from Tallahassee, Florida, where I first started flying fighters. We carried it with us all happily all the way through. Here's the chute, pops open, and what does it say? U.S. Navy. Now where the hell this chute came from, I don't know, but sure wasn't the chute I had in Tallahassee, Florida. And I no sooner got the chute open, and by the way, I had flying boots on, Aussie flying boots. It's a bad thing to do because most of the guys that bailed out with those damn boots on, when the thing fetched up, the boots kept going and they stayed there, and they ended up in the jungle or wherever they landed with no shoes, which is a not too funny story. But mine stayed on, thank God. I no sooner got floating down, and here come a couple of nips after me. And they went sailing ass by me. And with their tracers and stuff running, how they missed me, I don't know. And they're whipped out there and they're coming around to get me again. I thought, this is no good. This is crazy. I thought this is good. I thought this is the silliest thing I've ever, to me, that realize that one moment you're alive and the next moment you know you're going to be dead. You just know you're going to be dead the next moment. So I pulled the shroud lines down, just dumping the shrouds as fast as I could. Got a hold of the chute and dumped it. Now I'm free falling to get the hell out of that area. And down I go. After I got down so far, I noticed where I was relative to the sea and the rivers and everything else. I looked down and hell, I'm almost on top of the trees. So I let go of the chute. And about that time, again, it opened, popped open, and it popped open just as I hit the trees. And I went through the trees. Thank God I didn't hit on top of a tree. I hit between them. And I broke off branches, God knows how big, as I went through. And over there, the rainforest, it got trees way up here. And after you get through that first batch, then you're free fall all the way down. So after I went through that first batch of foliage and all, I'm looking down, I'm falling face forward, and I realize I'm falling, I still got about 3 floors to go, 3 stories to go. So I try to get my feet underneath me, kick my feet underneath me. Just about the time I did that, I hit the ground. And this knee went the wrong way. So that took care of that knee. I spent 10 days before I was picked up. And this must have been about 10 or 11 in the morning. I hear a plane coming up from behind me. I think, uh-oh. Under I go, I'm trying to get back. And I think, wait a minute, that isn't a Japanese plane. The sound of it, no. And I look around and it's a PBY, a flying boat. Finally, a flying boat coming right along the shoreline. And it's only up in the air, maybe 100 feet above me. And I have no clothes on, which reminds me, I have no clothes on because I want to get dry. I look like a chunk of cottage cheese for having been in the water for 10 days, soaking wet and all this kind of stuff. So the flying boat flies over, and these guys are waving me out of these big blisters that the Catalina's got. They're waving, and I picked up my Mae West, and I waved at them to give them some idea that I'm not a native. You know, look, I'm a GI, some kind of. And the boat, and the flying boat went by. It went way out, way out, way out, and went by. I couldn't tell where it went, but I thought, they'll get me. So I paddled out to sea, turned, and with them pointing out to sea. Still no sign of it anywhere. There's no boat, so I turn around, paddle back again. Paddle, 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 as best I could to get this thing. This is about the time I get all the way to the shoreline again. I hear engines. I look around and there's that damn Catalina. It's on the water. I never saw it land and everything else. And it's coming in toward me, and there's guys standing on each wingtip, guiding the pilot through the coral reefs is all. What he's doing is guiding. So again, I turn around and paddle, 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 back I go. And I got picked up. I have one more little thing to add to this. 28 years later, we're having a reunion in Niagara Falls, New York. And some guy says to me, Jake, there's a guy across the street in a hotel over there that thinks that you're the guy they've been looking for all these years. I said, what do you mean the guy's a bit? He says, well, this guy over there was on a PBY crew overseas, and they remember picking up a guy with no clothes on. They've always wondered who that guy was. I never was on their list when they looked at the list of guys to be picked up. I was never on their list because I'd gone inland, so naturally they didn't think of me being in the sea. So I went over to this hotel, up to the 5th floor, whatever it was, get off and start down the hallway, and the guy says to me, "You're the guy." And I said, "What do you mean you're the guy?" He says, "I can tell by looking at you, you're the guy." So he says, "Come here, I got something to show you." So I went in the hotel room with her, and here he's got pictures of me, 3 pictures of me, way back then, pictures of me approaching from out with my outrigger, another one a little closer, approaching to the PBY that's on the water, and another one right there about ready to be picked up on the plane. No clothes on at all. And as my smart friend Jack Purdy says, one of our, you just interviewed him probably, he says, "It's a good thing you had your little finger in a very clever way, otherwise it would have been a pornographic picture."
Lieutenant Raymond Giles thought his flight to Formosa in December of 1945 was going to be routine, but it was anything but, as he soon found out. His day went from best to worst, back to best again, all on one long flight.
Well, I suppose the worst day, and maybe the best day, together, was on a flight in the 31st of December, 1945, when we flew from Lingayen Gulf to Formosa to check things out. We had the full group, and as we approached Formosa land, all of a sudden, all hell broke loose with flak. And I happened to hear a thud, and I had a flak with a hole, a pretty good sized hole in my left wing, which knocked out my left engine and my hydraulic system. But the hydraulics were leaking and they caused a fire. So my airplane was on fire on the left side. We attempted to contact a submarine which was supposed to be in the area, and because the cockpit was getting pretty warm and we couldn't contact one. So suddenly, I guess it burned up all the hydraulic fluid and the fire went out. So the person that was with me went with me to check me out. Thought the airplane was fairly solid from on the other side and would probably fly. So I said, "Let's go," because I'd just soon be in the ocean, somewhere between here and the Philippines as I would be here. So we'll see if it will make it. And we took off, and they assigned somebody to go with me, and I'm sorry at this age I can't, in names I don't remember exactly who it was, but he sort of escorted me home. My hydraulic system was out, my left engine was out, and we were about 600 miles from home over water. So we continued and we made it, and as I come in for a landing, I had to crank my wheels down, and I had no hydraulics to help me nor to guide the airplane, so I made made sure I made the runway, and short, a little long, so I took it over the end of the run right over into the service section where it belonged without having to get out. So maybe that was the good and maybe that was the bad, but they dipped my tanks and there was nothing left. I think I must have come on air at the end.
Lieutenant Thomas Sims had a day of stone right from the first mission he was on. Yet his problem might have proved to be lucky for him.
I know one of my first missions, in fact the first mission I was on where we saw the Japanese, I was tail end Charlie, and I remember the CO, as we approached the target, said, "Prepare to drop your belly tanks," and just as he said that, my element leader, James Waldman dropped his tanks. Well, I'd never seen any tanks drop from an airplane before, and these two belly tanks floating down, and you know, that's 50 feet away or so, and I'm sort of, gee whiz. I reached down to punch mine off, and about that time a Zero comes straight up in front of me, and both my engines quit. Actually, they quit before this airplane passed right in front of me, and it gave me quite a thrill, I'll tell you. Got things going again, and I think, frankly, had they not quit, I think I would have cut the airplane in half, because it was, he'd yo-yoed on us apparently, and then came back up at the tail end of the squadron where I was, and I don't even know if he saw me or if he was lining up on me or what, but I suddenly stopped in midair, you might say. Probably surprised him. But anyway, I was still around, and shot an airplane down and headed home.
Lieutenant Walter Freeman, however, still carries the memory of one of his first missions when his lead pilot was shot down.
The mission where Condon got shot down. We were strafing a train in Louisiana Island, and I was flying Condon's wing. He got shot down, and here I was at a loss to know what to do. Fortunately, Joe Forrester was leading the second flight, and so he told me just tag on to his flight. So I did, and we got home okay. But that was a bad day.
But for other people, there were days of diamonds in their future. Sergeant Alan Red Wilson can still remember his flight in the P-38. It was cramped, but enjoyable.
One of the pilots, Captain Billy Gresham, we became somehow or another rather close, and he took me up for a piggyback ride in a P-38. Now, those of us that experienced being cramped, they removed the radio behind the armor, the pilot, and boy, when you squirmed up behind in there, I'll tell you, I had been up in other aircraft, and two-seated aircraft now, but it was scared the heck out of me, I'll put it that way.
Norman Weiss really felt part of the war effort when his pilots came back and gave him the details of their engagements. Those are moments that still stay with him.
The outfit's best day was up in the Mindanao when they were in the Great Turkish Chute, and hell, every time they go up, they'd come back with a couple scores. Made you feel pretty doggone good.
Lieutenant John Purdy still maintains a vivid memory of working with the Catalina trying to find downed flyers.
Have a 4-ship flight, and I'm leading the flight, and our mission is to cover a Catalina that is searching for 2 of our members that had been shot down just the previous day. And this is what they did in the 5th Air Force. They would, if there was any chance of retrieving a pilot or finding a pilot, they would send out a Catalina or a search mission and try to recover the pilot. And I'm leading, I'm following this PBY as he's right down on the water. And I'm S-ing back and forth over the PBY because you're going faster than they are. In order to maintain the same speed, you S back and forth so that you can keep them in sight at all times and not fly any faster than he is. And this PBY directed us right towards a Japanese convoy, and which I thought was friendly when I first spotted it. And when I found out we actually were not looking at anything except keeping this PBY in our sights. And when I realized it's a Japanese convoy, because my wingman and one of the element leaders called up bogies at 3 o'clock high and bogies at 6 o'clock high, and that's when I realized it's an enemy convoy coming into reinforce Ormond Bay, which is the other side of Leyte from where we had landed and had our main airstrips. So I told the PBY to get his tail in the clouds, and I used a couple of choice words. And because it was a layer of clouds about 2,000 feet that he could get into, and I told him to get into that because we were climbing for altitude. And of course, we get up to altitude, and keeping our eye on these Japanese fighter planes that are covering the convoy. And when we got above them, I thought that they're not paying much attention to us, but we'll make a couple passes at them, or maybe one pass at them and head for home. And we must have made about 6 or 7 passes. And all they were doing is circling this convoy. Their orders probably were to don't pay any attention to us. A few fighters, stay and cover the convoy in case bombers came in, and don't let the bombers get to this convoy. So in the consequences, I ended up shooting down 2. We shot down a total of 5 airplanes and 2 probables, and against 25 to 30 enemy airplanes, and yet they made very little attempt even to protect themselves or go after us, because apparently their orders were just to protect the convoy. So that was a great experience. 4 of us getting 5 airplanes and 2 probables. So that was probably the best day that I can remember over there.
During these constantly changing days, from diamonds to stone and back, missions were carried out and the war effort was moving forward. Sometimes the effort was moving too swiftly and signals got crossed. This happened one day to Lieutenant Perry Dahl. He thought the green flare was for him, but it was really for a B-24 taking off.
Again, early on out of Buna, when I was flying as a wingman, we were on a mission over to a place called in the New Admiralties. And we went over, and the weather was very, very bad. We could not complete the mission, and we couldn't, as a matter of fact, we didn't even find the island we were going out. The Seabees were about ready to get overrun. They were building an airstrip out there, and they needed somebody to come out there and strafe and do some stuff for them. And again, I wasn't leading the flight. I was back there close to tail end Charlie. Matter of fact, I think I was an element leader about that time, probably my 10th or 12th mission. And on the way back, on the way out and the way back, the weather was just atrocious. We were right on the deck trying to stay out of the clouds, and the weather got worse and worse. And after about 3 or 4 hours of flying, we couldn't find the island, so we came home, started home, and the weather deteriorated even more. And we were just all strung out in a big string over the water. And I remember we were snaking around. And I remember somebody in that flight caught a wingtip in the water and cartwheeled. And we went by, in New Britain, we went by a runway that was just cut out of the jungle there. But it was a nice big runway because it had a B-24 on it. And I was we were the last 2 airplanes, my wingman and myself, the last 2 airplanes in this formation. And I could hardly keep the rest of the airplanes in sight in front of me, and it was pretty obvious to me that we were pretty much lost. We didn't know where we were going, and we weren't trained instrument pilots. We were really bad flying instruments. We didn't have a lot of nav aids over there. We had to call for steers, and with the thunderstorms in the area and everything, it was very difficult. In any event, when I saw that runway down there, I went by and I saw that runway. And I saw Jeeps were on the ground driving around, and these Jeeps, it was high noon, but it was such a thunderstorm that they were driving around with their lights on, torrential rain. And I saw this thing, so I called Jack, my guy that was flying my wing, and I said, we're going to put this thing down and wait for another day. So I wheeled around, and as I came on downward leg, I looked over the tower, and I got what I thought was a green light. We call it a biscuit gun. The tower had green lights and red lights, and I saw this green light flash in my direction, and I said, aha, he's cleared me to land. So I came around, dropped the gear, came in, landed on a runway, Well, what had happened is the green light was given for that B-24, which was sitting on the end of the runway, for him to take off. And he was taking off in the opposite direction from me. I had no idea which way the wind was blowing. I just had this field in sight, and I was going to land. So just about the time I touched down, with probably less than 100 knots of airspeed, by that time I was committed to touchdown. I looked up, and about midway down the runway, here comes 4 engines at me. He was on a takeoff roll. I think probably the only guy more startled myself is probably the nose gunner who was sitting at the nose of the airplane. If there was one there, I'm not sure who was there. But in any event, it was too late to pour the coal to it, go around. It was too late to do anything, except I did what I could. There was water, 6 inches of water all over that runway, and it was pure steel planking, very slick. I did what I could to swerve so we didn't get a dead head on. I went right underneath his number 1 and 2 engines. I kind of ducked my head, and I propped ran it in front of my end and ran it behind me, and turned my airplane 180 degrees, and I'm still doing 80 miles an hour, going backwards down the runway. And of course the engines and the props and everything are flowing all off of this B-24. And I went down the end of the off the end of the runway, down into a gully which was full of water, and I jumped out of the airplane, got on the lead end, stepped on dry land, and my little airplane washed out to sea.
Then there were the flights that established records for the unit. After all, they were taught by the best, Charles Lindbergh, on how to conserve fuel to traverse long distances. This training certainly helped Lieutenant Joseph Forster after receiving major damage to his aircraft during a mission.
So this one particular mission that was laid on was to cover the B-24s in a strike at Balikpapan, Borneo. And the mission required that the 475th Fighter Group would cover the B-24s over the target. But first of all, we had to fly up to the Halmahera, because we couldn't get there from Biak, so we had to stage through Halmahera. And then the plan was, and it worked out very well, we didn't escort them to the target. We picked them up before they got to the target. The distance to the target was 836 miles, and it was the longest trip that we had ever attempted. So takeoff was normal. We made our takeoff time, and of course we used what Lindbergh had taught us, cruise climb. And it was a very gentle climb to altitude. We're going up, I think it was 22,000 feet as I recall. It was a light overcast, about 23,000 feet. You could see through it, but you couldn't see horizontally. And we escorted the 24s over Balikpapan, and the target was the oil refineries. And they really hit them good. Or you've never seen so much black smoke in all your life coming up from the refineries. It made you feel good, real good. So in the ensuing mess of taking them out from the target, our job was to take them out, and then we would be relieved by another P-38 outfit, and then they would be relieved by P-47s. So we were taking the 24s out, and we were just in the process of turning them loose to the other group. And all of a sudden, in front of me, from 9 o'clock, directly across my bow, so to speak, nose, was this P-38. And he was going downhill. You could see he was descending, picking up speed. And about 300 yards behind him was a Zeke 52, right on his butt. But he wasn't quite close enough to fire. And it was a 90-degree deflection shot. I didn't aim, I just dumped the nose and said, "Pluck," and the damn thing just came unglued. Cowling came off, it caught on fire. And about a half a second burst. Well, my wingman was able to confirm that one for me. So we were leaving and weaving around, you know, and the 24s were pulling ahead of us. And I looked off at 9 o'clock again, and there was a little joker out there. It would come out of this thin overcast and sort of take a look around, and then he'd disappear back up. So I called him in to Colonel Smith, and he said, Joe, I said he was about 3 miles over there. He says, we're short on gas, and we got to get going. But you can pull out and make one pass on him. So as I was turning to my left to make pass, I cleared myself. And at the same time, I saw a little joker come out of the thin overcast up here and go straight down on Colonel Smith. Straight down. And I thought to myself real quick, why go get that one? We got one right here, you know. He didn't even touch Colonel Smith. And he went down below him, so I started turning back in to the right, always turn into the guy that you're going to chase. And he just looped right back up like this and came around, and I was just pulling all I could. And somebody says, Joe, he's firing at you. And with that, boom, I was hit in my left engine. I didn't know at first where I was hit, but I soon found out. So our tactics were always turn into the attack. And if you can make the turn to the right, do so, because of the torque of a single-engine aircraft. They couldn't turn as tight. The Japs could not turn as tight as we could at high speeds. And our tactics were is to get that speed up. So I just went for the ground, the sea, from about 18,000 feet, I guess, at that time, something like that. And when I started the 180-degree roll going straight down, I hit it, and everything started shaking. The yoke was going like this. You couldn't read the instrument panel at all. And it was bucking, and the tail was going like this. And it frightened me because I hadn't been into this severe situation before. And so I started pulling out, and that was tough. It was tough. I dropped the dive flaps, and then it started to respond. And of course, I was trying to look behind to see if that sucker was back there. Thank God he wasn't, because he could have had me then. Smoke and oil fumes were coming into the cockpit, so I knew I had a real problem when you start smelling oil. I finally pulled it out, and I was right on the waves, and the sea was terribly rough that day, terribly rough. The swells were running about, I'd say, 25 or 30 feet, and it was a high wind, and it just blew the foam right off the top of it. Foam, well, I should say spray, not foam. Spray was coming up on the windshield, and I could smell the salt above the smoke in the cockpit. And I looked at the oil pressure gauge, it was 0. And the oil temperature was rising very rapidly. So I had to feather the engine. And you know, everything worked just perfect. I went through the procedure of feathering up the engine, shutting the engine down, and everything just worked absolutely perfect. So here I was on the waves, and I couldn't climb on single engine. It just, of course, I was a little excited, you know. And I couldn't climb. And I didn't want to use too much throttle because I wanted to save as much fuel as I could. So when you get yourself in a situation like that, you start expending your ammunition, you see. You shoot your ammunition up. So I'd go brup, and wait, let them cool, the barrels cool a little bit, brup. And it seemed like that went on for ages, brup. What I was trying to do, of course, is save the barrels on those machine guns. Finally, I got so upset, I said, the hell with those damn gun barrels, and immediately the airplane started to climb. But it was a slow climb, and you know, we used slow climb procedures. That means you would climb, but you'd make a headway too. And I called Colonel Smith and told him I was on the deck on single engine, and let him know what was going on. And he said, well, Joe, he says, take it over to one of the submarines. Well, you couldn't have found a submarine anywhere. It was such rough water. So that was out. And he said, well, maybe you can take it to one of the Catalinas, which was off the shore of the Celebes. And I said, well, if I can get that far. So I got on course, and I was kind of hesitant about going to the shortest distance to the Celebes as opposed to staying on course so I could possibly get home. Well, I started climbing, and one of the first things I wanted to do is at least get high enough to, if I had to bail out, you know, if it caught on fire or something like that, not knowing what damage had been done. I set up the right engine for the single engine operation, long cruise, and finally I hit landfall on the Celebes. I got to the end of the Celebes, and that was a big decision time. Can I make it across to the Halmaheras? And I fussed around with that idea for a long, long time. And I was charting myself as best I could and figuring out how much gas I had and could I make it. So I made the decision I'm going to try it. So when I left the Celebes for Mauritania, Halmaheras, I figured that with the winds I had, I could make it, and I'm going to try it. So by this time, I had gotten up to around 3,500 feet. So I was, you know, if I had to bail out, no problem. And I flew that. It was an hour and something, about an hour and 10 minutes, without a checkpoint, over just water. So at the end of an hour, we had a radar station at the Halmaheras. I started calling for a steer, radar steer, and I couldn't raise that radar station. Couldn't raise it at all. And I was getting panicky because I couldn't see land. And all of a sudden, this voice came over the radio that I recognized. It was Lieutenant Rataski. He was one of our squadron mates. He had gotten back to the strip with just a few extra gallons of gas. And he heard me calling, and he recognized my voice, of course. He knew who I was. And he came over the radio and says, Joe, what do you need? I'll transmit or repeat it to the radar station. And I told him I was out approximately 270 degrees, I thought, from the radar station. And he says, I'll relay that to you. So within 3 minutes, they came back. He came back, rather, and he says, for identification purposes, you must turn 90 degrees to the right and fly that 1 minute. Well, that's the hardest turn I've ever made in my life, because I knew I was losing ground. I thought I was losing ground, you see. So I turned to the right 90 degrees, and boom, before the 1 minute was up, he says, Joe, they got you. So, boy, you talk about relief. So they brought me right in over the strip. You couldn't have asked for a better landing. Normally, on a single engine landing, you come in straight, get on the ground as quickly as you can. And I was so fast I couldn't put the gear down. So I was like a smart aleck. I guess everybody on the ground thought I was a smart aleck. I came in over the strip, I peeled off to the right and to the downwind leg to go back out about a mile and make the landing. And you know, I damn near stalled out right there on the downwind leg. So I started talking to myself. I said, yo, get a hold of yourself and fly this thing like the book says. So I went out about a mile, downwind leg, base leg, and on the approach, got my airspeed down, put the gear down, worked perfect. Came in about a quarter of a mile out and put down half flaps, worked perfect. And came over the end of the strip and put the rest of the flaps down and came down perfect. Everything worked perfect. That's the reason I love a P-38. So much worked perfect. And started on the brakes, and I just, later on, I just cut the tread right off of it. And went down to the end. You can't taxi a P-38 on single engine unless you're at Muroc Lake or something like that, you know, on a drag seatbelt. But I came over that thing and I was going so fast, I turned to the right, went under this, there was some 38s here and then a B-24 was here. I went in between those, made a 180-degree turn and came back and parked perfectly in alignment with these P-38. Jesus Christ. I opened the cockpit, and of course nobody met. We didn't have crew chiefs. And I stood up, and I was going to go down and let the ladder down so I could get down. And I don't know, the next thing I knew, I was on the ground. I had passed out or whatever, and went off head first on the ground. And the next thing I know, I was laying on my back there, and I hear all these voices coming. Hey, Joe, I see you made it, you know. And I kind of rolled over and looked up, and guess who was there? Tommy McGuire. Tommy had been listening to me on the radio, and he came over, and after I kissed the ground, he came over and shook my hand, and it made me feel so good.
Although each and every mission was filled with intrigue and danger, many of the young warriors looked at this time period as one of great adventure. Although the possibility of dying was there, they felt invincible. After all, they were young and fighting for freedom. They knew they would win. Yet this adventure would come to an end, and many would begin the long trip home. To the men of the 475th who spent many days and months and perhaps years in the South Pacific, that was some of the best news they could ever hear.
The one that I think that was most happy and when I came to tears was I was sitting in Buckner Bay on August, so whenever the things took place there, you see, the victory. And it was an emotional time for all of us. And those little sailors that were on that LST, I don't know how long they keep cooped up on that thing, but they were ecstatic, you know, because they were able to get off those bouncing tubs, you know.
I guess the day they told me I was going home. Because it was kind of a shock to me because I really didn't expect to go home. The reason being is that I didn't have near as many missions as a lot of the people that were going home, but it was because I'd already had quite a bit more time in theater than some of the other people, because I'd been in New Guinea about probably almost 5 or 6 months before I got into the fighter outfit. So that was a happy day. It was unexpected and very much appreciated.
The day I came home, yeah.
Duty, honor, country. All the brave young men of the 475th fully understood what each of these words means. This nation stands today because of their commitment to these words and their fellow countrymen. A grateful nation thanks these men and others like them for their sacrifices given so graciously so others may live in freedom.